Okay, so here we are. I have one thing that's going around with David there. David, raise your hand. He has my little sheet there. NPR wrote to me this week. To me. I don't know why they wrote to me. Why did NPR write to me? And they want people who have seen both debates next week. And they will talk on Thursday morning, August 1st. And if you want to be part of the August 1st number of people who want to speak to NPR about you being uncommitted and giving your reactions about the debates, then
They want undecided.
they want undecided people. So, but if you're on, we have an Elizabeth Warren person.
Yeah, but I won't do it. Okay.
Undecided Democrat. You're not supposed to be an undecided Republican.
We're looking for speakers for WGSC to talk about
They
Democratic
wrote to
candidates.
me hoping to get Democrats. I think that was the point. But David's coming around with my paper, and I will show you the letter that NPR wrote to me, my response to him, and then on the back it's what he responded to me again. So if I'm asking very personal questions on the little sheet I have you fill out, it's because he wants to know all about your intimate everything.
In other words, he wants to know demographics.
Demographics.
That's simple.
Now, I have to tell you, I really couldn't decide, what was it I couldn't decide? I couldn't decide class. So I didn't put anything about class. I decided to put occupation, because that really determines, what you did to get ready for whatever work you are doing or did or whatever. I put I was a retired chemistry teacher. I don't know if that determines my class. I don't know what that is. I know that my grandfather left England. His name was Albert. Her name was Albert. And he left because he had 3 children who were not going to be able to be anything in the world except blacksmiths. My grandfather was a blacksmith. And he came to the United States with his 3 sons. They were like 12, 5 and 3, something like that. And he came to New Haven. And he put all 3 boys through Yale. And get this, Yale Divinity School. All 3 boys went to Yale Divinity School. And don't ask how I got to be Jewish, but there it is. With my father's permission, I want you to know. Hi, Colin. Okay. Well, anyway, David's going to have you fill out that little form or wherever that is. He's going to take it around. But you can read his letters, his 2 letters to me and my letter back, and I'm trying to be welcoming and whatever. I will send those forms to him, and he gets to pick who's going to be with him. I don't get to pick. I had it all set out in my mind. I said, 5 people. He wants 5 people. Well, I will pick a young and an old woman, a young and an old man, and we'll have Laura Ann Weaver. And I said, that covers the whole basis. We've got everything covered. So, here we go. Okay, so we're going to do announcements. And David has the microphone. So we have announcements today. So besides filling out a little form, if you want to speak and be on next week after the meeting debates. Doc.
I just want to make sure everybody knows that the Unitarian Spencer Memorial Service will be August 10th, 3 o'clock at the Fifth Third Arena at UC. And there will be transportation by way of golf carts and vans from the various parking lots around UC to get up to the arenas. And there will be a small reception for everybody afterwards as well. And about the last 2 hours.
Did we just stare down?
Here we go.
Want to take the burden off it?
What date is that again? The date? The 10th.
The date, what date is it?
August 10th, Saturday, August 10th, 3 o'clock. I will send a formal invitation to you.
And fill it out for Peter.
So up at the table, we have our schedule of events for the next couple of weeks. We have it through the 17th of September. You will notice, starting in September, we're starting to hear from some of our political candidates who are running for school board and for judge. So our fall time will be including that. We have some others that have been scheduled in October, but don't have September 21st.
Don't worry about
that. I would like to remind all of you that every week, no matter where we are, our room rental is $50. So, last week, and the week before, and the week before, our till did not have $50. That means that last week we did? Okay. So, 2 weeks we did not have $50 in there. Strongly recommend that you contribute here because Alberta and I are not going to be paying for this out of our pockets, okay? This is your group. This is your group. Now, somebody did say, well, I gave it my church. I'm not going to contribute. This has nothing to do with any kind of religion. This is not supporting. This is rent. Rent. So I'm going to be passing this around. We're hoping we get a $2 contribution from each one of you. Thank you very much.
Any other announcements?
Any other announcements? Oh, there we go. Marlena.
Hello, Marlene Danfield, running for Cincinnati Public School Board this year. So I know that next week a lot of different groups are having debate parties. My campaign, Brookfield for Board, is one of them. We'll be at Veracruz in Price Hill from 8 to 10 on Tuesday the 30th. Tickets are still available, and if you're interested in getting one, please see me. Space is limited, so we have to ticket, and you have to purchase in advance. But see me about that. And I am very excited to share that at the Young Democrats of America convention, they moved to charter a Muslim caucus. And they said, hey, you young folks need to take the lead, because what we're doing in the establishment, it's not working. So we need your energy. We need everybody on board to make sure that we're moving in the right direction as a party and as a country. So it was really great it was very inspired, and met a lot of great people from around the country who are working just as hard as we are.
Go, Carol.
Okay, so last week we talked a little bit about lunches, and everybody is pretty happy. So Dave and Elizabeth and I talked a little bit. I called Sister Judy, and she said that they can do pizza, and in the wintertime they can do soup. So, maybe a couple in a month or so we might expand that. I don't know if everybody knows. Does everybody know Sister Judy? And she works in I guess over the Rhine now. In the West End with people trying to teach them what it means to work and come and do a job. So she has people in need who jobs come and make this food. We know that I know her from a long time ago, like 30 years, and she catered my daughter's wedding. I did. My husband said, we could have a bunch of criminals in here serving this food, but they're great, and their food was great. It was just really, really wonderful. So she's working with people who need jobs. So the main thing we want to do now is get some of the work off of Katie's back. So Dave and Elizabeth and I are trying to figure out how we can do that. So we'll continue doing the same thing, but you might be, if you don't sign up the week before, you might be sending your order to a different address, a different email address. Okay?
There you go.
Before we begin, you go ahead.
Oh,
I got one more thing.
I'm just wondering if anybody got to a budget hearing in the past week or two. This is, to me, it's probably the most important thing that happens in this city with the new budget starting out quite soon. And I have sometimes been able to go to a budget hearing. There was one near not far from my house, I think it was a year ago, David Mann led that hearing, only one council person to lead the hearing. And I think that's the way it was this year. You might have to travel their way to be part of it. You can speak. I spoke at the budget hearing a year ago. You can speak. I can't drive around a lot, so I didn't try to find where I could go. And of course, there are some hearings at City Hall, I believe. But I just wondered if anybody knew about.
I don't know about it, but I did go to the one at City Hall in May. City Council doesn't meet in the summer.
Well, they have the hearings.
But the hearings, I don't know about. But I did go to one in May, and that was when City Manager's office was presenting budget for the new year. They were presenting recommendations. But it is really important, I think, for all the community members to show up and express their concerns. In particular, a concern about tax abatements this year because the 20-year tax abatement agreement ends in December. And they need to hear from the community what your expectations are for the future agreement in regard to the public schools in particular, because one of the things I've learned is the residential abatements come from the state and are not part of that 20-year agreement. And we're seeing a lot of inequity in the way residential abatements are being used, and it's causing a great deal of concern because the rest of us are paying. But the thing is, the city can put restrictions on those. Those residential abatements come from the state, but the city does have some influence on them. So it's really important this year to show up at your community council meetings, pay attention to when I don't think it's publicized very well. When the tax abatement community meetings are being held. Like Martha said, she knew of some, I'm not sure.
So maybe our speaker will be able to tell. I think our speaker will tell you.
But before we proceed, I just want to make sure that I give a major shout out to Doc Christensen. Doc has been very instrumental in getting us St. John's Unitarian Church and also First United Unitarian and St. John's for us to have our meetings. In fact, she upfronted the security deposit that we needed to have for this to take place. So I want to thank you, Doc, for all the work that you did.
Any other announcements? We're ready. We're ready. So here we are. This is Stephanie Moes. She's from Legal Aid, and she's the one who got either selected or appointed to be here. We're going to find out in just a minute. So here she is, Stephanie Moes.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We're going to turn down a little bit soft-spoken, but it's because I was first a social worker for a number of years, and so I don't always speak as loud as you might expect. So if I start to trail off, let me know so I can speak up, okay? I apologize. I brought handouts, but I did not probably bring enough for everyone. If you do want a handout and you don't have them, there's some additional copies here. I was sharing with Peter that I'm originally from Cleveland, and when I heard it was a meeting of the Democrats in Cincinnati, I thought it would be small, so I wasn't really sure how many folks would be here. Just teasing. It's great to see all of you here and really to see this kind of turnout on the status of affordable housing. John Schreider was going to speak. I know he would love to come out and will be open to coming out. For those of you who don't know John, he is director of LASO, Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio. He has, for many years before that, been litigation director with Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati. And he has worked within legal aid here in Cincinnati for over 40 years. So he just has a tremendous amount of experience. I've been with the legal aid here for about 15 years. Again, I was from Cleveland originally. I clerked for a federal judge there and had worked in both child welfare and public mental health as a social worker before that. I'm really excited to talk about the status of affordable housing because in my work, the most important thing is really figuring out how can we end poverty in this country. And for me, I have a real passion for children's issues, but that in fact led me to working on housing issues at Legal Aid because housing is really the crux of, I would imagine, just about any issue that you could say to me right now that this is what is, really where your heart is. Whether it's about environmental justice, whether it's about mental health or health of folks, whether it's about education. I know we've got someone running for school board. Wherever your heart is at, it is likely that there's a very close connection with housing. And then until we solve housing troubles in this country, we're not solving the rest of it. We're not improving Cincinnati public schools if we don't address housing disparities and the problems of housing within our community. It's my chance to get to speak a little bit to hopefully to be elected school board member. And one of the biggest challenges that Cincinnati Public Schools has is the amount of change every year in the students that attend any given school. So they may see turnover within their student population. At the beginning of the year and the end of the year, the classrooms look nothing the same because families have been forced to move because of evictions they were facing, because of poor conditions, because a better opportunity came along and where they were living within the city did not offer something that was affordable for them. And that school has now changed entirely. And so we're asking teachers to teach when you don't even have the same group of students from day to day. And until we address that, we're not improving Cincinnati public schools. Until we address the fact that you have a school like Kilgore, which is a neighborhood school and one of the highest performing schools, but it's based on where people live and who gets to live in Kilgore School District and who gets to live where I live, which is in East Price Hill, who gets to live in Reese Price or Carson. It looks very, very different. And until we address the fact that there are not equal opportunities for folks to live wherever they want in this city, that based on income, based on just that, you would get to decide whether you're in a high-performing or a low-performing school, we're not improving school issues. Similarly, environmental justice issues, health issues, all tie back ultimately to housing and making sure that wherever there are opportunities, there's affordable housing. But if your passion is really employment opportunities, it's really focused on increasing wages, increasing folks having jobs, ultimately you have to focus on housing. Because again, where those jobs are correlates to where people are living. And so one of the articles that I shared today is, I think it's a couple years old, but it's just as relevant today as it was in 2017. It came out from the National Low-Income Housing Group, and it's called A Place to Come Home. And it really was a pitch for them to try to get more federal investment into affordable housing. And we know right now that has not been successful. Many of the folks in the Democratic Party are currently putting forth proposals on how we could put more federal investment in housing. You're here today to hear about affordable housing. As you listen to those potential folks for the candidacy, really pay attention to what they're saying about how we increase federal dollars into affordable housing. Because at the end of the day, that's where most of the money is going to come. We're going to talk about some local solutions at the end, but if we don't start talking about this as a federal problem, we're not going to really make any sort of real gains. Many of you are very educated about the affordable housing crisis. How many units shortage do we have at the low income level of affordable housing units? What's the number? Yes.
You asked how many units?
How many units are we missing?
40,000.
40,000, we all know that, $40,000. How much does it cost to build one unit of affordable housing in our community?
115,000.
Did you say 150?
I said 115,000.
115,000 would be bargain prices, but you might get one done. It's probably closer to 200,000. In some parts of the country, it's 600,000 or more for one unit of affordable housing. So when we think about how we solve this problem, the only way we're solving a problem of that level of magnitude is going to be with some federal solutions, right? There's no way that we are going to, as just a community, find the total amount of money we need to solve that. And so it's really important that we are asking elected officials at all levels of government, including the federal government, to respond to this crisis. And it truly, truly is a crisis not only in our community, but in other communities. And so if you're interested in just really thinking through whatever it is that is the passion for you and how it ties to housing, my hope is at the end of the day that everyone in this room will become truly an advocate for affordable housing. Whatever issues are also the hot button issues for you, the important issues that you work on day in and day out, I hope that you'll understand how the connection happens between housing. And that really, this article really does tie into that, I think, very nicely. So what is the state of affordable housing here in Hamilton County? I did bring the study that has the 40,000 number in it, and it's also on this paper. It's also a couple of years old, came out a couple of years ago. There is nothing to suggest that those numbers have gotten better. It's probably worse now. And it really is saying there's at least a gap of 40,000 available units for folks at the lower income levels in our community. And that really for those folks, a couple things are happening. If those units don't exist, sometimes we don't really sit back and think about what does that mean. It's easy to just talk about a number. And numbers for some people can be really powerful, but numbers translate into stories, into what's happening in the ground. So 40,000 units don't exist for people who have very little money. What does that mean in our community? What are the stories that attach to that number?
Homelessness.
Homelessness, right? It means the camp story. It means the story of folks trying just to find a place to lay their heads at night because of that $40,000 number. What else does it mean? What other stories?
Family separation.
Family separation. It means mom's sleeping in her car and the kids are sleeping over at grandma's house because grandma doesn't have room for everybody, but at least the kids can sleep on the couch, but there's not enough couches for mom, so mom's sleeping in her car. That's what 40,000 units means. What other stories does it mean for our community?
Nutrition needs are not being met.
Right, it means this month as a family, I made a decision that we're just going to eat whatever we can eat. I'm going to tell you to eat extra at school that day, really fill up at lunch, because we're not going to eat dinner, but I'm going to pay that landlord. Because I'm not going to have us out on the street yet again, and I don't know where we're going to go. So that's what else it means. Anyone else know stories? Yeah.
Kids are taken out of school early so that they can find beds and shelters for the night. So
That's
they're
right.
missing out on education.
It means we're not going to be able to take that all-important test that maybe would have allowed you to get into Walnut Hills School, one of our premier schools, because today I have to take you out early because I need you to help me load up the truck that we're borrowing from some friend of some friend that I had to do goodness knows what in order to get to today, but we can't lose our belongings in addition to our house. I gotta hold on to that. I can't buy beds again for our community. So 40,000 is a number, but the stories are really devastating. And it's really important to never lose sight of that is what we're talking about. And we talk about why is it important to solve a crisis? It's the stories that I really want us to think about. It's not important really at the end of the day if the numbers match. It's only important because of the stories underneath that number. And I think that is one of the pieces that I'm hoping, if you don't do anything else, if you read nothing else, if you don't think about this in any other way, I provided for you, and I would encourage you to maybe reach out to this group. They would probably provide a speaker or two for you on this topic. But who has seen the report from Cohere? Has anyone seen this report? Just came out in June, so hot off the presses. It's called Stories of the Housing Crisis in Cincinnati, the Urgent Need for a Better Path Forward. And Cohere is a group of very, very, very cool people who are determined to bring the stories of what they call everyday experts to the decision makers and to the people who have real authority and power to make change. And so they help to sit down around the community and collect the stories of those who are truly living with the affordable housing crisis. We all experience it as a community because we all experience an affordable housing crisis when we think about how it impacts our school, how it impacts the criminal justice system, how it impacts the needs that we have in this community. There's any number of ways it impacts all of us. But those directly facing the lack of affordable housing, their stories are captured in here. And for those who, I did not bring enough copies for everyone. Those who have it. Peter, I think, is going to send out the link. I include the link on the sort of quick overview of where I'm going today, so that you can make sure to take a look at those stories, because they really do tell the community what's happening. And I think there's nothing better than everyday experts on this point. You know, I am really, what I value most about my job as a legal aid attorney is that I am given the honor of helping to tell the stories of the clients that I represent. But that's all I do. I'm just a secondhand storyteller, right? And so these are firsthand. You can really hear what folks are going through in this community. And so it's not gotten any better since 2017. There's been some small attempts. I will say that we do hear it's talked about more, right? It seems like we're talking about affordable housing, the lack of affordable housing. It's being discussed more and more, but it still remains really, truly a crisis in our community. And one of the other things that folks don't realize is just how evictions play into this too. So the other part is not just the lack of units that we have here in Cincinnati, but also that folks are being put out pretty often, more often than many other parts of the country. We have one of the highest eviction rates throughout the country. And how many of you have read the book Evicted? Matthew Desmond. This is a wonderful book. I'm going to put a picture of that. I said I was only going to ask you to read one thing, so now it's two. I would really encourage you to check out Evicted, buy it, or check it out from your local library. And it does a wonderful job. He also, Matthew Desmond, is a secondhand storyteller, but he's very skilled at it and does a wonderful job capturing the stories of folks, particularly in the Milwaukee area, who have been experiencing what it means to not have affordable housing. A lack of affordable housing, though, does directly translate into this eviction crisis that we are experiencing. So when you hear about, in the newspaper stories, you'll hear about the city finally starting to talk about putting some money toward eviction prevention, keeping people in their homes. And it really is directly, though, tied to the fact that there aren't affordable units. And so that 40,000 folks, we talked about where they were. And the other place they are is in housing that's just not affordable, right? So they're making almost nothing. An affordable rent might be $500 or $600. They're out working every day, every minute, but maybe they're making, minimum wage. Maybe they're making as much as $15 an hour. And I included this on this chart with the pretty yellow and red little bar graph. It's one that John insisted I pass around. So he uses it, but I kind of updated it a little bit for 2019. Median monthly residential rent in the Cincinnati metropolitan area, $1,309. So there's a lot of folks that number is not affordable for. And we talk a lot, many of us, we hear even elected officials, people that are running for office or elected officials say, we could just get to $15 an hour, we're there, right? Home free. Things are good. I think we heard yesterday maybe somebody was talking about we need really $20 an hour. Well, I'm not sure what the number is that's really a livable wage, but I can tell you what 15 translates into. For an affordable rent, that would be $780 a month, which means that much of the rental market remains out of reach. Even if we manage to get wages up to $15 an hour, we're talking about a median rent of $13.09. And this increase in rents has really been pretty dramatic in recent years. We've had year over year of very, very large increase in rents after the housing crisis of 2008. Because the folks losing their homes, many went into the rental market. There hasn't been a lot of new building of rental units. And so we have people that really aren't looking to be homeowners right now. We also have new generation of folks that really don't see homeownership in the same way. They see homeownership as being something that is a bit dangerous, a bit tricky, and so a lot of younger people looking to rent. All of these people pushing out folks who don't have a lot of income because they can rent at higher rates to somebody else. Okay? And so that's really kind of where we are, and again, I don't think it is an overstatement to say that many of us who do this work every day do see it as a crisis. We see that there are very few neighborhoods that people can without assistance, without government subsidy, afford an apartment. One of the neighborhoods where there's some what I would call naturally occurring affordable housing is East Priceville. But that's an interesting neighborhood. It is home for me. How many other people live East Priceville? Anybody else an East Priceville resident? David? good, okay. Not many in this room, right? It's an interesting place to live. I have a son, and every day I kind of think about where I'm living. There's some affordable housing, but the landlords are not taking care of it, and that neighborhood is struggling. It's really, really difficult. And so what you have is a naturally occurring affordable housing, but housing that really, I question whether anyone should have to live there. And these are places that maybe are renting at $7.80 a month, but it's you and the raccoons and the rats and everything else getting to live with maybe you have electricity 2/3 of the days out of the month, but then the other third, things aren't really working right at your place. And so, it's just something to think about. We also have folks in our community, I think there's some real numbers that we don't know yet that I always hope we'll know. It's surprising to me how many people in our community, both homeowners and tenants, are living without water. You think about that, you think that's not happening in the United States. Well, again, this is an effect of a lack of affordable housing because folks have nowhere else to go, so they're struggling to stay here, and they're not paying water bills. And I've worked with several clients who have lived for years without water. To just be, I think, amazed. I am amazed at how creative they're being. These are even senior citizens living without water because they don't want to give up their home. They know there's nowhere else they can afford, and they can't afford our water bills, which have become pretty high based on everything going on with consent decree and MSD and the sewer rates. We all know that, right? If any of us are paying our water bills, we know just how high they can be. And so it's a choice of, do I get to keep the roof, or do I get to keep a flushing toilet? And it's really hard to think as a community that we're making folks make these kind of decisions, but we truly, truly are. I know I don't have much time, and I know I'm going to do this mostly for questions because I heard it's a very dynamic group, which I love because I don't always get dynamic groups. Kind of on a good note, right? So everyone's like, gosh, why did I come out today? It's beautiful outside, it's really great in here. There are some good things going on. How many of you are familiar with what LISC and Greater Cincinnati Foundation are doing in terms of planning process for a community-wide housing strategy? Does anybody? What, are you a part of any of the committees yet, or just heard about it? Okay, wonderful.
Well, we had a great talk from the woman in OTR who was part of developing this plan for any new development that has a scoring of how much it does for low-income housing, how much it has community involvement in the planning and so forth. So we did have a great talk on that, but that's one little piece of
the puzzle. That's kind of a little bit later, policy solutions. What this is talking about is this 10-year plan that the city has gotten on board with, and the county is getting on board with too, to say there's going to be a planning process, and we're going to develop a 10-year plan to say where as a community, what direction should we take housing across the board, not just affordable housing. It's very, very important if you're passionate about housing, and certainly if you're passionate about affordable housing, that you find a way to that table, right? Legal Aid has worked really hard to make sure that we're at the table, that we can share the perspective of our clients. But if you haven't already, I might recommend or think about whether you want to invite Kathy Schwab, who is Executive Director of LISC, to talk more about that, because it really is a great opportunity. They did a similar strategy up in Detroit, and it resulted in funders providing tremendous amounts of money into that community, certainly not what Detroit needs, but a good amount of money that funders love to see plans, and then they like to fund. They don't like to fund if people don't have very, very coherent plans. So they're working with a group out of Philadelphia, in fact, who are consultants that are helping with the development of this plan, and I think it's going to be meaningful. However, if it sets the direction for 10 years, boy oh boy, do we want to make sure that it's setting the direction in the direction we want to go, right? And that's why I really encourage all of you to figure out what can we do to be at this table and to be a part of these conversations. All right, am I still good? Cincinnati Housing Trust Fund. If John were here, he would be talking a lot about this. He's talking somewhere else about this right now. How many are familiar with Cincinnati Housing Trust Fund? Hey, a few more. You should all be very familiar with that if you're living in the city of Cincinnati. And you should really want to make sure that you are talking with your elected officials and potential want-to-be elected officials about what are they doing to fund the Housing Trust Fund. Because we currently now have one in our community. The only, I'm a pretty straight shooter most times, and I'm not going to change for you all. The only elected official who's really figured out a way to put money into that fund has been David Mann. Clearly did a little bit with some V-ticket dollars, but it was very small. David Mann has helped out with a short-term rental ordinance that's going to fund it. But it's one thing for folks to say they're supportive of affordable housing, it's another for them to have a real plan about how we're going to create those units, especially when it's at the ticket and those dollar amounts that we talked about. And so really making sure that folks that are in those offices have visions of how are we going to get this money? Not just, I like affordable housing, but how are we going to get it? Councilmember Denard has recently started to talk about that any developers doing developments in the city that require things from the city, that we are going to require them to provide so many units of affordable housing. So that is another solution. It's not necessarily money into the trust fund, but it is a policy solution that would allow us to try to address that. I will say that there are some folks who think that just requiring developers to pay money rather than having developers do affordable units might be a better solution as a community, because when you let developers do, quote, affordable units, it becomes really interesting to talk about how different folks define affordable, which we haven't done today, right? And maybe in this room, each of us has a very different unit of affordable. When I talk about affordable units, I talk about those with the very lowest income, the 40,000 who can't find any units. When a developer gets a lot of money from the state, for example, in a tax credit, I heard in affordable units up in Loveland, and they were renting at about $1,200 for a 2-bedroom. And so the idea of affordability is really crucial, and so that's why I'm sort of a proponent of, I really just want you to pay the money into the fund, and then I'm going to make sure that goes in the right direction, versus letting a developer, really counting on a developer to do the right thing with the development, where they have a lot of incentives perhaps to do something else. So those are some of the things that are exciting, that are happening. We're light years behind many other places in the country. But the good thing about being light years behind is that we don't have to create everything from scratch. We've got great models to emulate, and I hope that we can do that. I know there's some questions about tax abatements. We can talk more about that, but I'm going to let that kind of come from folks ready for questions, because I can see everybody's ready to go.
I have 2 questions. When you talk about a unit, affordable unit, what is a unit? And then if you can explain or describe how Section 8 housing fits into this formula.
Sure. So an affordable unit is just where one family can live. It's one apartment, one single family, if you're doing a single family development for some reason, but it's just where one family lives. Section 8, what I call housing choice voucher, because there's a couple, Section 8 is really interesting. It really refers to a part of the law. I try not to use the term because it has, for whatever reason, taken on a lot of negative connotations in some communities. And so it becomes sort of code words for the folks I don't want living next to me. And sometimes it becomes code words for race. And really, that I just don't want any minorities living in my community. And so I use what the vouchers really are, they're called, and what they were designed to do, because I think it's more descriptive. And so it's called housing choice vouchers. That's what Section 8 vouchers truly are. They're called housing choice vouchers. And they were created by the federal government with the goal, with the idea of how do we solve all of these other terrible social problems? We give people opportunities to live in areas that are high opportunity. We allow people to make choices about where they want to live, versus the only place you can live right now is East Price Hill, because that's the only place that's going to be affordable. It's no longer downtown, over the Rhine, West End, Walnut Hills, all these neighborhoods, even Avondale a little bit, because there's a lot of gentrification going on even in Avondale right now. But it's a housing choice voucher. It's a subsidy from the federal government. It says that we've determined that your income is really not enough to meet your housing needs, and for that reason, we're going to help subsidize that by only requiring you to pay 30% of your gross. It's still a lot of money, 30% of your gross income before taxes for this housing, for you and your family. It's, theoretically, it's a really great program, and we need a lot more of it. Probably one of the primary problems with affordable housing is, like, sum it up in just one, what's the problem with affordable housing? It's the lack of affordable housing. If we had a lot more vouchers, that would really help. We do have a problem with landlords not accepting housing choice vouchers. And so they are not accepted by some landlords for a variety of reasons. Some good and some truly illegal reasons why they're not accepted. And that's a real fight to get landlords to accept them. So a lot of times the only place those housing choice vouchers are accepted are back in that neighborhood of East Price Hill that I'm using as my example. I'm using it fondly as my neighborhood. That's it, that's the only place. And also housing choice vouchers do not always cover the true market rent in areas that would be opportunities. So if our goal was to have a program that allowed for us to let people live where there are high-performing school districts, where there are jobs, where there are transportation opportunities, we're not achieving it right now in this community with the housing choice voucher because those communities are not, the rents have become so high that the housing choice voucher does not allow folks to live there. Was that, did that answer your question? Yeah.
Is it true that there's still 2,000 people on the waiting list for housing vouchers, and the list is actually closed most of the time?
It's always closed. I promise to sing from the rooftops when it's open. If it's only 2,000, I'm feeling like you've got better news than I do. I thought that it was sometimes closer to 10.
Well, maybe. I have very old information.
Yeah, so sometimes as many as 10,000. Sometimes with folks that I'm really desperate to try to help get into housing, we have to just, it's like you're going to move outside of the county because you're never getting on affordable housing here. Warren County, maybe once a year opens up, the housing choice vouchers will open up. In Hamilton County, it's a very, very long time. And CMHA is really going through a lot of budget struggles right now.
Go ahead.
I have been involved with housing professionally. I've been involved with housing professionally for many years. And just a comment about the Section 8. So much of it depends on, the quality of it depends on the way the city provides inspections and the standards that are used. No one wants to live next to a house that is purely what the city requires for affordable, not for affordable, but for the housing standard. We all would rather live next to a house that is above the housing standard for the community. And but in so many places that I have visited, some places it's really good, but in many cities the inspection of affordable housing units has been terrible. And so that gives the Section 8 a very bad name for people who have to live next to it, for people who want to live there and want to live with good quality. So just to say, I don't know what it is here in Cincinnati. I have no idea if the city is enforcing a standard for Section 8 that is sufficient. I really do not know. But then I have a question to ask, and that is, I understand that the city council is developing a plan or at least studying affordable housing right now. Is that true?
Yes, and it's tied into that 10-year list plan. So they're supposed to, the city has said, we are going to be supportive of this process. We will participate with the process that LISC and Greater Cincinnati Foundation are doing. And so yes, that is true.
Well, what committee is in charge of it?
So
Can we visit or can we, how do we get involved in it?
Yeah, I always say visiting any and all of your council members is a great idea, but the quickest way to be a part of this project would be Kathy Schwab, Executive Director, LISC, and I really encourage you to have her out here to talk. She's very excited. But when you saw some of the press releases, she was the woman, darker-haired woman in the back. She was right there with all of the elected officials talking about this. Tell me if I can, I want to go back. You didn't ask a question about housing choice vouchers, but I wanted to go back to what you said. This is a really, really important point. That, we all live together, right? We're all living in community together, and that there have been, because perhaps of a variety of landlords not taking good care of housing choice voucher properties, there are some problems. Within our community, they are inspected by CMHA. So I always want to make sure that I get the right information out. They're not inspected by the city of Cincinnati, unless someone would call in. All inspections in the city of Cincinnati right now happen by complaint only. So the city is not going out and doing sort of affirmative inspections on rental housing without someone making complaints. CMHA does do an inspection, and my clients who live in that housing would say that they're not doing a very great job, because they get in there and lo and behold, 3 months after they move in, it's now winter. It looks good, and that furnace looked real good in July, but it sure doesn't look good now, and it's not working. One of the things that since I have a microphone, I get to say what I want. One of the things that I've wanted for a long time in our city has been a rental inspection program. But I don't want it for just housing choice voucher properties. I want every property that is rented to be inspected. And the reason that's really important, that it not just be for housing choice voucher or not just for affordable, is that would just drive landlords out of the market. So it's always this very delicate balancing act of, if we're expecting you all to live up to a higher code, then why do I do this at all? It's become it's cost prohibitive at this point. If all rental properties are required, then we don't get into this, well, it's just easier for me not to do the housing choice voucher program or not to participate with CMHA. But there are a lot of folks who don't have housing choice voucher who are living in deplorable conditions, and they really it should not be on the tenant having to deal with the landlord and already in a very imbalanced situation to make those repairs. The city should affirmatively be making sure, I mean, this is a product these landlords offer. It should be a decent product. We inspect for health at the restaurant. You expect that the health department is saying that this restaurant is okay, that they haven't shut it down. Why should I not feel confident that a rental unit offered, you know, however it was offered, that it's at least going to be habitable, that at least I'm not going to have to deal with it not having a furnace or having my roof collapse on me and harm my young child. And many, many, many communities have rental inspection. Every time we get a little bit close to that, our elected officials, even the most progressive of our elected officials, get cold feet, because at the end of the day, they do not want to upset the apartment association and the landlord community, because those folks vote too. And so it's been very hard, many years on this, but any piece that you have an opportunity to think about whether this is something that you're supportive of, certainly many of the tenants in our communities would appreciate that.
Two questions. One, I'm still mystified. Did you figure up to $600,000 for affordable housing? Where does that come from? You can get a hell of a house for $600,000. And secondly, Habitat for Humanity, are they helping this program or any impact?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So $600,000, you know, one of the things these developers are really great at is just building up how much the prices are. And most of the affordable housing that's being built right now is through the low-income housing tax credit. And so they'll send the government, and they'll say, hey, this is what it's going to cost to do this new development for a whole variety of reasons here. But please look it up. Don't fact check me on this. You'll find many stories of this happening, and you're right. It seems ridiculous. We could build a place and give it to this family and spend far less money. And so Habitat does provide a great model. Habitat, if Ed, who runs Habitat were here, he would say the need is just too great. There are just so many families that they cannot help. And then also it's a home ownership program. And so they generally, I think the monthly payments are going to be $550, $600, which for many people is affordable, but not for everyone. We always have to remember those folks whose entire income, if you're disabled and you've not worked, how much do you think you get per month? You receive disability from the government, but you don't have a work history. What do you think that number is?
1,500. 1,500.
1,500, 850? 771.
Wow.
771. So think about what you can afford if your entire income. Think about what that looks like to try to live on 771 a month. And so it's not affordable for everyone, and I never want to miss those folks who really, you know, I think we have a responsibility, more responsibility. It should be a legal responsibility to make sure. There's just not enough with Habitat. Price Hill, well, there's a CDC in town that's creating affordable housing opportunities like Habitat but for immigrant and those who can't qualify for Habitat, because Habitat has a credit score. At the end of the day, these are underwritten. So many folks may not be able to get Habitat homes because they cannot meet the credit score. If you're an undocumented immigrant in our community right now, you also are not going to be getting a Habitat home for a variety of reasons. So Price Hill Will has said, we're going to work outside all systems. We're going to create a product open to all, but it's very much like a Habitat home with a sweat equity aspect and very affordable. The problem with that is us trying to figure out how to ramp it up to scale. So far it's done about 10 homes, and obviously 10 doesn't hit 40,000. 10 and 40,000, that's an inequality that even I can figure out. I'm sorry. Bennett?
Could you speak on that poison both in the paint and the housing stock and in the water supply needed to the rent?
Absolutely, that's a great question. We're a very old community, and so lead is throughout much of our properties, and this is at all income levels. We're recently dealing with some cases where CMHA houses have lead in them. It's very, very costly to abate, and so many landlords struggle with figuring out how to abate it. It's also very dangerous for folks to live there, and so families are left with a difficult choice of, do I continue to perhaps do something that's harming my child, but at least we have a roof over our heads, or do we move? You know, it's very unfortunate, but much of our rental housing has lead in it. It's one of the reasons why, again, I really wanted that rental inspection program, because I think people need to know that. And also, we could then require landlords to fix the lead issues before those children move in. Lead is also in the pipes. I do think, you know, Clint really brought that to all of our attention. Within our community, with the lead paint is still a much larger hazard. Lead within the pipes is much smaller. Now, Greater Cincinnati Waterworks is requiring, wherever there are lead pipes, that they be replaced. But for the clients I work with, it's a real hardship because the cost is pretty dramatic. And so if you do have lead pipes coming into your home, what's going to happen is that Waterworks will replace it, but they'll replace it and then they'll, if you don't pay for it, at that time what they're going to do is put it on your tax bill. And so for many of our low-income homeowners, this is just one more reason where now they're going to have that choice. The lead pipes, it wouldn't have mattered if they replaced it because they're not going to be able to drink water because they can't afford their water bill anymore. Or they're at risk of losing their home because their taxes might result in them being foreclosed upon. So it's a real problem without any easy solutions, and it just results in greater unaffordability issues. Did you have anything else specifically you wanted to mention about lead, or?
No, that's pretty much covered.
Okay.
Speaking of water, I recently moved to the city of Northwood, and they found a dead bird in their the drinking water tank. And so they had to divert the water from this. Norwood used to supply a lot of Cincinnati with its water from an actual spring. Now the city of Cincinnati is going to supply Norwood. I'm on a block committee where at the street festival, we talk about tax abatements. I paid $800 a month for an okay apartment. It was about the cheapest I could find in the city. For what I was doing. There's a house up the street is on the market for $300,000. And this is Norwood. A house that probably 15 years ago was going for about $40,000. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to the city of Cincinnati, go to the council meeting and request $200 to help pay for this street festival. Just $200, just a token amount to make the city a sponsor and, you know, so we're kind of working together. And they said, we don't have $200 to give you. We are so broke that if we cut every service except for fire and police, we would still be in the red. How does that happen? We have houses going for $300,000. That whole Rookwood development, it's just unfathomable. They can't fix the streets. They can't fill the potholes. You think?
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what was the answer. Someone
Tax abatements. Rookwood's all tax abatement.
Is Rookwood all tax abatement?
Rookwood is tax abatement.
I would also say there's a little bit of confidence levels within Norwood. You may need to look at who you have as your elected officials. That's a place knowing sort of like some of the how the sausages are made kind of pieces. I'm not moving. I'm in East Price Hill. I'm not moving to Norwood. Done.
Just as a historical fact, the problem since the mid-1980s is that all of the federal programs for housing are directed to home ownership. For nonprofits to build, it has to be like for Hammond Habitat, it has to be for home ownership. And there's a huge population that should never be homeowners because they cannot afford to maintain their property and pay their taxes and all the rest. So that if you're ever talking to a legislature about it, you need to say we need rental affordable housing. And giving nonprofits the ability to build rental housing, which we're still struggling a lot with.
Yeah, I think those are very good points.
I want to thank you for wonderful presentations. Real stories that we all need to hear and that the country needs to hear. I heard a solution recently that blew my mind really, and that was from about insurance, health insurance companies, some health insurance companies who have realized that they are providing more money than they ever anticipated for people's health insurance, whereas if the people had stable housing, that it would not cost so much, and they are providing the housing. And I'm wondering if you know, I couldn't remember when I told people about this, well, what insurance company is this, where is this, is it possible to expand this, et cetera?
I have not heard that exact story, but I have heard of health insurance companies paying more attention to what's called the social determinants of health, and housing being probably the #1 social determinant. They've determined that what are the social determinants of health, a variety of things, but housing is crucial. And so right now, in fact, even with the state of Ohio, the insurance companies are negotiating about Medicaid and what they will and won't cover under Ohio Medicaid. And legal aid is at the table trying, we don't have it here. I'm going to need to, I would love to hear more about where you might have seen that it was already in place, but trying to get health insurance companies to pay for housing-related needs, because ultimately, we see the same thing, that it really makes the hugest impact in health. And so the conversations are being had, there's at least open dialogue, and insurance companies saying, yeah, we really want to look at this. If it's already in place somewhere, I would love to know that, because that would be a huge step forward, for sure.
I have so many questions, but I will limit them. The first one is not actually a question, but I was wondering if you could talk a little about the McKinney-Vento Act and how that relates to students experiencing homelessness. And at convention last week, in platform committee, they talked about a moratorium on single-family housing in terms of its effects on the environment and sustainability. And I was curious to hear what your thoughts might be. I definitely have thoughts about it.
Okay. Well, let me take the easy one first, which is the first one. McKinney-Vento. There is, for those of you who don't know, there is a federal law, and what's really interesting about McKinney-Vento that many people don't know is it was Republican. It was a Republican sponsor that created this law. He was really passionate about this issue, so it's not always just the Democrats, although I'm glad to be, here with you all and with friends. But sometimes we can get legislation, even if we have to partner across the aisle. And this was one of those times where that did happen, and it's very successful. And it does say that if you are homeless, you get to continue to go to the school where you were attending. It doesn't matter if you are currently living outside of that neighborhood school district. The school district has to pay for you. It doesn't even matter if you're outside of the state, like you are now living somewhere down in Kentucky, but you're a Cincinnati Public School child. You have to be transported by Cincinnati Public Schools. They share, in fact, with wherever you are in Kentucky. And they make sure that you get to stay in that school during the time that you're homeless. Cincinnati Public Schools has a pretty good program called Project Connect here in the community, which helps provide educational opportunities in addition to just what the law requires, but other supports for those families. They make sure that they're working with the homeless community, with places like Bethany House, to make sure that they're serving the needs of those children. On whether there should be a moratorium on single-family homes, I'm going to defer on that one. I haven't ever given it really any thought. It's the first time, in fact, hearing it. I do understand the environmental impact. I think the reality is we've got a lot of single-family homes in our community, many of which are in very poor condition. So I do think we're quickly having to reach a decision about whether we're going to demolish or whether we're going to try to rehab what we have in some of our communities.
Anyone else?
Last question. I'm sure you know the wonderful book by Alice Skirts.
On my bookshelf at home.
Called Econicide. Is she still active around housing issues?
I see her at events that I'm at, particularly with the Homeless Coalition. I think
Yes,
her focus
right,
has always
right.
been
Right.
really related to, Alice is always one who, those who are most in need is where Alice is going to be, and so for her, that's been the
That's
Homeless
right.
Coalition.
She is on the board of,
Yeah.
I'm sure she is. So, she and Josh Spring do everything they can possibly do.
They do.
To help people find a place to be. And you remember they had a press conference a few months ago about the lawsuit against the city and the police for running people out of the camps. You remember? And so they've been able now to include the mayor as a defendant in this lawsuit. That's right, gosh, I mean, the little things we can do, it seems, but we at least did get to hear that day from homeless people who didn't know where to go when the police were cracking the camps out, and one woman said she walked and walked and walked, she was afraid to stop walking, she'd be arrested. A homeless woman, and she said she finally reached her car, and she fell down and went to sleep, and was arrested.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. Thank you all for having us.
You guys have done it again, another good day.
We have an announcement.
Wait, we have a couple of announcements, and I want to make sure that everybody has seen my letter from NPR and signed up for the NPR interview if you're going to be here a week from Thursday, having seen both debates, if you're not committed to one of the debaters. So go ahead, Sue.
First, I want to apologize to Katie and Alberta that I was not here for the announcements. I was up in Mason trying to organize some women. So anyways, there is 2 protests that is going to be on August the 1st. Towards or against Trump. The first one is at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a public landing. And just the fact that it is going to be right up against US Bank Arena. So that one I think is going to be, more of a real protest. And then United We Stand Together is what they're calling the other. And it's at 6 o'clock. It's at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. That one, that is also August 1st, during the same time that, there's sort of two different styles of protest. So anyways, that is more ABCAB in Hamilton County, Downs, and that kind of stuff. So a large group of different coalition of groups. And then I did want to mention that tonight Charmaine is marching in the Norwood Day Parade, and that's at 7 o'clock. And they're meeting at Ashland Avenue and Montgomery Road.
There we go. Fill it out for Peter. She's got a good name. Did any of our other late people have announcements? Okay.
If you want to order a lunch for tomorrow, make sure you do it before you leave, or I will be taking orders for next week. I did have somebody that emailed me this morning at 10:51 expecting a lunch. I said, sorry, orders, I tend to send the orders in at noon on Monday the day before. And we have an extra turkey sandwich here in case anybody wants to take that with them. Thank you.
Okay, now if you have not filled out your little form for August 1st in the morning, please, you guys need to try to get it later, you can see that. Thank you so much for coming, and come next week.